gosh, with an intro like that, now I actually have to do a good job. I was really banking on not being expected to do a good job, but I will try all the same. If you're like me, you folks have definitely been enjoying all sorts of things here, including what is arguably one of the greatest single examples of freedom that we have, air conditioning. Wow. I recently read an article about how there are health emergencies in other countries because their temperatures are approaching the high 70s and low 80s. Meanwhile, here it's 120 degrees outside, and we're in here just as comfortable as ever. God bless America. Oh, man. My favorite thing about FreedomFest is that people come here from all over the world to share all ideas and all sorts of incredible solutions and ventures that they're working on, all with the same idea: for us to be freer tomorrow than we are today. And I love that about this. And I believe there's really only one thing that's in the way of us being as free as we want to be. And it's such a small thing, it's barely even worth noting, but there is this one small thing: other people. Yes, sadly, there are these other people that don't understand and appreciate the importance of freedom. Who here was once one of those other people? That's okay. It's okay to admit it. I was definitely one of those other people at one time. I didn't recognize how important freedom was, and I do now. How do we get people who don't recognize the importance of freedom to join us? Because let's be clear, if we want to be as free as possible, we need to grow and foster this culture of liberty that we're building here. Well, I have found a way, I believe, to distill down everything that we believe, everything that we are working on, everything that the liberty movement is doing to try to make us more free. I believe I've distilled it down into one word: respect. Now, here, let me prove that to you. Who here is against respect? There's usually at least one edgy person who goes, yeah, me, I hate respect, but you're a good crowd. Nice, mature crowd. But I'm going to go even further. In order for all of us to be here, right now, we had to travel here. Now, some of us live right up the road. Some of us live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. But wherever we live, just to be able to get here, we had to come into relatively close proximity with thousands or tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people to get from where we live to here right now. And the vast majority of all those people that we came into relatively close proximity with, almost all of them, we had no idea who they were. We knew nothing about them. We didn't know what their motivations were. We didn't know a single thing about them. And yet we had a relatively reasonable expectation that we were going to get here safe and sound. There's a very simple reason for that. We all have this intrinsic understanding of respecting one another as individual human beings. All of those other people that were getting around, they also had a relatively reasonable expectation that you weren't going to harm them as well. Now, you didn't know each other. You didn't know anything about each other. If you actually sat down and talked about what you thought about things, you'd probably come away disagreeing quite a bit. But the bottom line is you both respect that one another are individual human beings. It's something that we almost don't even have to speak about because it's so hardwired into us. It's why we don't stomp on human beings like we would a cockroach or something like that. Now, there is one exception to this. There are people who don't have that intrinsic level of respect, or they've learned to overcome it to be able to get the things that they want. We call these people sociopaths and criminals and politicians. But I repeat myself. But the fact is, we have this reasonable expectation of it, and it's that expectation that allows us to thrive. If we were scared to go outside, we certainly couldn't thrive. It is that level of individual human respect that allows us to be our most prosperous, our most harmonious, and frankly, our happiest possible. That's what human respect looks like, us all being here right now. Let me tell you a story about what a lack of human respect looks like. There's a family named the Hernandez family. A husband and wife, Matt and Taki Hernandez, and their children, Emma and Aria. And one day, Emma, who at the time was a newborn, started having some swelling in her leg and was fussy. And so they brought her to a hospital, and some tests and some x-rays were done. And the doctor on site called it abuse. Now, the interesting thing is that all of the medical evidence that they had, all the testing that they had, showed that there was no injury due to abuse. There was more than likely a chronic health condition. For some reason, they still called it abuse. And based on that, one doctor saying that there was a possibility of abuse, both Emma and Aria were taken from Matt and Taki. They were arrested, and as part of their bond conditions, they weren't allowed to speak with or be within a certain number of feet of each other, which meant they certainly couldn't live together. So in one evening, two innocent parents not only lost their children, but they were effectively legally estranged from one another, couldn't even speak to one another indefinitely. That's what a lack of human respect looks like. They spent thousands of dollars to get all of the medical evidence. They fought to get their children's records, and the state fought them hard to keep them from getting their records. They finally get their records, and sure enough, there's no abuse. It's a chronic health condition that caused this. And they said, great, we're going to go to court. This will all get wrapped up. The judge wouldn't allow that evidence to be presented, and instead took the word of one child abuse pediatrician who had no evidence of their own, who was not familiar with that chronic health condition, and whose evidence was, well, yeah, when I see these types of injuries, statistically they tend to be abuse. And when that doctor was asked to cite the source of that statistic, he said, you can look it up on the internet. The judge wouldn't allow medical experts to testify. And instead, she ordered non-reunification, which means that the children were placed permanently or placed for a long period of time in foster care, and were up for the possibility of being placed for adoption, where Matt and Taki would never see their children again. They weren't just not innocent until proven guilty. They were guilty without a chance to be able to prove their innocence. That is what a lack of human respect looks like. Now, you're probably wondering how I know about this. Well, I started an organization a couple of years ago called You Are the Power. And what we do is we find people who are being disrespected by their local and state governments, and we rally the public to put pressure on these officials to do the right thing. So when we found out about this, I will never stop you from applauding. Thank you so much. And further notice, anytime you want to stop me to applaud, do not hesitate. Don't let the fact that I'm talking stop. Thank you. We're good? Okay, good. So we found out about this. We immediately went to work. We alerted the public. And within a matter of hours, thousands, tens of thousands of people were reaching out to these public officials and saying that the family court judge, the child abuse, or the child protective services worker, the caseworker manager, everyone involved in it, and saying the same thing. Respect these people as individual human beings and let them have the ability to prove that they didn't do anything wrong and drop this case. Well, when we did that, all of a sudden a bunch of other families started coming out of the woodwork. And then we discovered the most horrifying thing of all. This wasn't some rogue pediatrician that caused this. It turns out that this is happening countless times in states across the country because of a perverse funding incentive that's being created by Title IV of the Social Security Act, where the federal government pays child protective services and everyone down that pipeline, but only if they call it abuse. If they don't call it abuse, they get no money. But if they do call it abuse, even if it turns out not to be abuse, they get money. And if that child ends up being put in foster care, they get even more money. And if that child ends up being taken away from their parents permanently and put up for adoption, they get even more money. And then if it turns out that child has a health condition, they get even more money. So when that pediatrician that is part of this pipeline sees this child with an injury that's being caused by a sickness, they don't say, oh no, this child has this illness, we need to get them treatment immediately. They think, cha-ching, this is the most money we could get. That is what it looks like when someone looks at a child, a newborn, and doesn't see them as an individual human being. They see them as a funding opportunity. And when the parents get in the way because they want their child back, they see them as a political obstacle. That is what a lack of respecting one another as individual human beings looks like. And the problem is, far too many of our fellow human beings out here put aside that expectation of human respect when it comes to the government. Even though the government is literally just people. It's just human beings who are saying, I'm with the government, right? If I were to walk up to you and put a gun to your head and say, give me half your wallet and I'll give some of it back to you if I think that you deserve it, you might fight me, you might shoot me. I'm in Nevada, you probably shoot me. You might run away, you might call for help, or you might comply, but it's not because you think that that's a good arrangement, it's because you don't want to get hurt, right? But if I get behind this podium, now I got my fancy suit on, and I say, folks, I've got some incredible news. I have a new plan that's going to give any of you money who needs it. But only if you need it. I'm not just going to hand out money to everyone. And of course, there's a tax that's involved to be able to fund this. Everyone in here is going to treat that the same way that they would treat me just walking up to you individually. But most people put that expectation aside because the government's doing it. Even though the harm I'm doing when I'm behind that podium is exponentially worse than when I'm just robbing one person. So what we do at You Are the Power is we find these individual cases that no one could possibly think are okay. And we don't just bring them to the public and say, this is what it looks like when government has too much power and too little accountability. And this is what it looks like when we are not expecting them to respect us as individual human beings. We also give them a call to action. And that's what we did. That's what we did with this case, and that's what we're doing with many others. Now, I could sit here and tell you all about the metrics of what we do. I could tell you about all the families that we've helped, not just with these child protective service abuse cases, but with eminent domain cases, zoning abuse cases, threatening charities, all sorts of stuff. I could tell you all about that. I could tell you about the tens of millions of people who have seen our work and the millions of people who have joined us in cyberbullying the government. But instead, what I'm going to do is focus on that one family. I'm going to tell you what our work looked like for the Hernandez family. They're reunited. Emma and Aria Hernandez are back with family. We are working on getting them back permanently in Matt and Tucky's home. And after nearly a year of being estranged, the bond conditions were dropped and Matt and Tucky Hernandez are living together as husband and wife, as they always should. And we're doing the same for many other families as well. This is what it looks like when we work together. The work we do at You Are the Power is very simple. We are trying to share two main messages. Number one, you would be shocked at what we can do when we work together, and we invite you to join us on it. And the other thing is, when we consistently expect to be respected as individual human beings, we won't have to do this anymore, because the bottom line is always this. When we are respected as individual human beings, we are our most prosperous, we are our most harmonious, we are our most free, and we are the happiest we can possibly be. I call that the principle of human respect. And I invite you to join me at You Are the Power, where we not only spread that principle, but we act upon it. Thank you guys so much for being here.